when we're talking about technology, it's really important to start with the customer experience in mind, and talk about what are the use cases that we're trying to serve with this new piece of capability. So while that slide pack is coming up, what I wanted to start, how I want to do is I'll run through on a high level what the use case is, all right? And then Jamie, what I'll get you to do is talk through what's happening under the hood. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to start out pretty simple and straightforward with just a simple e-commerce one-off purchase. Now, if we start on the left, that's a screenshot of a standard e-com checkout where I'm selecting my payment method. In this instance, we're selecting Pay To. The customer would enter their Pay ID or their BSBN account number and click Pay. What happens then is they receive a push notification in their mobile banking app, which has the agreement for them to authorize that payment. At the same time, in real time, we are getting back in that online checkout a confirmation of the payment and the order is successful. And then in that last screenshot on the right in number 4, that is the reporting, updating in real time that funds have been received in the account. Okay, pretty straightforward. Jamie, why don't you just take us through what's actually happening there with Pay To?
Yeah, definitely. First off, great job on the introductions. I feel like you've very much raised the bars with the intros. But yes, if we could go to the next slide, what I'll do is I'll talk through the actual Pay To flow. So you might not be able to read any of this, and that's okay because I will zoom in. But what you're seeing here is a high-level end-to-end Pay To flow for this example here. It might seem like a lot is going on, but what I like to do and remind everybody is that this is actually 2 separate actions that we're looking at. So the first half of this flow is actually the agreement piece, and then the second half is the payment piece. So what we'll do is I'll just kind of dive into the agreement piece first, and then we'll speak to the payment. So this is what the actual agreement flow looks like on the back end. So as Chris mentioned, when you're looking at the that demo checkout process that we just looked at, the user is inputting their, they select Pay To, they might put in their Pay ID, and the second they click submit, what's actually happening on the back end is that e-commerce shop is interacting with our API and sending through the actual agreement terms. And if you can just flip back to the slide, for the agreement slide, we flip back by accident here. Perfect, thank you. So what you're seeing here is that initial step is that interaction with Zeto's API. We'll do some validation on the data that's being provided. So we just need to make sure that the terms of the agreement fits the templates that are expected. And then from that point, it's actually created and sent through to the end customer. So within, this might take a handful of seconds. That's where the user will actually see that agreement show up in their banking application, as Chris mentioned in the previous. Then from that point, let's just assume this is a beautiful, happy flow. The customer will authorize that agreement right away. And that is really the first piece of Pay To, is that agreement piece. So once that has happened, we can go to the payment flow. Thank you. We're actually sending a notification right back to that merchant application, so that e-commerce shop, notifying them that, yep, Chris has actually accepted that agreement, so you're good to go. At that very moment, the website will actually then trigger the payment request. So they know that the agreement is set, so they're now ready to actually request to pull those funds for that floral t-shirt that Chris wanted. So at that point, again, we will verify that that information matches the terms of the agreement. So this is a quick example of that. If the t-shirt was, or Chris accepted that the t-shirt was going to be worth $55, and that's what he authorized in his banking app. If for some reason something happens and the website now wants to pull $65, we're actually going to stop that right there, because that is not what Chris agreed to. Chris only wanted to spend $55 on that t-shirt. So assuming that passes, again, this is all happens in real time, so I might be taking a little bit of time to talk here, but the funds are actually debited from Chris's account, assuming he has that $55 in his account, and are immediately credited to the merchant's nominated account. And then that's the end. So those 2 pieces, the agreement and the payment, all make up that entire flow that we saw on that first screen and line up with a single purchase. So really, from that moment that user puts in their information and they click checkout, everything starts to happen. And then the second they also authorize that agreement, everything happens in real time. And those screens between the number 2 and number 3 happen in real time and within seconds.
Amazing. Okay, that's really great. So there's an agreement portion happening, and then the payment portion, and all of that is happening in real time. Okay, yep. So look, that's a pretty simple, straightforward use case. Maybe let's flick to the next slide. Let's talk about what a recurring payment is, right? Because I think we've got a lot of organizations attending today where, you know, customer loyalty is key, return visits or frequency of payment is built into their proposition. So in this instance, you know, the example is a subscription service. Right? If I start on the left side again, we've got someone signing up to a subscription, electing to pay with Pay2, just as before. They click submit payment. That notification comes through. In 3, we can see the details of the mandate request, that the agreement request that they are authorizing. And then in step 4, we've got the recurring payment that is being taken out each month. And that final page is around the automatic reconciliation and settlement of funds in real time. So can you talk us through what the difference is here between what we saw in that first use case and what happens in a recurring flow?
Yeah, definitely. One thing I just want to point out as well is you might hear both the term agreement and mandate be used. Those can be used interchangeably. They are the same thing in the case of Pay2. But definitely, so really how everything works, again, going back to the idea that you have 2 pieces, right? You have the agreement and then you have the payment. So in an example of a recurring payment, it really comes down to what you put into that actual agreement itself. So for the first example, we were looking at something as an example that was a fixed price. It would only be debited once, and you might even add a certain expiry date to that, whether it's, you know, the following business day as an example. So really that agreement in the first scenario was very strict. It was one time, that's it. Once the payment is done, it can't be used again. For something like a recurring payment, you can actually add certain terms or select certain types. As an example, usage-based. So my energy bill on a monthly basis might vary depending on how much I'm using my energy in the house or my apartment. You can use balloon rates. So there's a few options there. You can also use variable. And what ends up happening is you're still going through the same process where the user will be prompted with that agreement, but the terms will be slightly different. So as an end customer, when I get that initial agreement, I know that, again, let's just use energy, that in the terms of the agreement, I'm going to get billed or, you know, debited from my account on a monthly basis from X company. And there might be a maximum value as an example. So it might just know that at a maximum value within this term, I won't get debited more than $500 a month for my energy bill. Once that's approved, because of the terms that you've set on that, you can actually then initiate more than one payment against that one agreement. So you're not having to actually ask the user to accept an agreement on a monthly basis because it's already set, the expectation is there, the consent is there as well. So on a monthly basis, what your application can initiate a payment, it references that agreement that was created. Zepto will just validate to make sure that, yes, this payment is within the terms of the agreement and pull those funds. And you can simply just, again, initiate those payments on a monthly basis.